Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of My Boomer Buddies podcast, where we tell it like it was and is. Today, one of my oldest, dearest friends, Kathy St. Martin. In the old days, back in school, growing up and all that, she was Kathy Gustafson. She's here with us today. And Kathy, thanks for being on the show again. Always good to
You're,
see you.
you're welcome. It's great to see you too.
So, Kathy, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I've been reading a book called The Anxious Generation, and it just clicked in my mind. Oh, it'd be fun to talk about some of the childhood games that we played in our neighborhoods and kind of relate it to this book a little bit. I haven't finished the book, but it just clicked some thoughts about a lot of the fun that we had as children.
Okay, so we're the same grade.
Yep.
And we went to a lot of the same schools growing up and everything. And you were in one neighborhood over, but I was over there all the time because some of my closest buddies were your neighbors. We
Right.
are what we call Med Lakers because we grew up on the west side of Medicine Lake, and that's in Plymouth, Minnesota, suburb of Minneapolis. For all of you who may not know where Medicine Lake is. And we came up with some creative games along with some of the normal games that kids our age back in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s grew up and played. What was your favorite game to play, Kathy?
Oh my goodness. I liked a lot of them. I like some of the pickup game sports, basketball, we'd play horse or jump rope. There wasn't a lot of outdoor stuff that I didn't enjoy, I guess. I certainly wouldn't have gotten into wrestling, but my brothers did.
Yeah, you had older brothers, and I remember it's pretty cool. You'd get right in there with a softball, baseball, whatever it was, you would do it. So you mentioned when we talked a few days ago, you talked about kick the can. What about that game did you like?
I didn't play that one as much. They have a new version of it out that is a cosmic version, and the can lights up and all kinds of things. They made it pretty fancy. But I was just thinking about how I think I've heard on your show before, a reminder of when we grew up, we were outside until the streetlights came on. And then, after we did our chores, we could go outside and we spent all our time outside. In our neighborhood, I had some restrictions. I was not allowed to go down on the lake road until I was probably in late junior high or high school. We rode bike everywhere. We just spent a lot of time together with kids doing lots of things. We played foursquare, lots of pickup sports, badminton, wiffle ball, kickball. We went ice skating down on the lake on Medicine Lake. And
Yeah.
my dad always was an ice fisherman, and he'd have his fish house out, and then I would go down and skate, and I'd always have somewhere to warm up. So that was always really fun. I don't know if you remember playing Spud. That was kind of a dodgeball type of game too. Annie over. We played a lot when Lakoskis came over to their grandparents. So it wasn't even just us. It was grandchildren of neighbors and cousins of neighbors that would show up to play in these sports. We just had a lot of fun with a variety of games.
So you mentioned earlier, Kathy, about jump rope. The girls were always better jump ropers, at least in our neighborhood. Why is that?
They probably did it more often, but the guys would get involved in our neighborhood too, because I think it was a challenge sort of sometimes, to do some of the fancier moves, or if we used two jump ropes at a time or something, we got pretty sophisticated about it.
Well, I suppose that makes sense. You did it more. I know when we tried to jump in, the timing thing didn't always go well, but when it worked, how cool was that? What a great feeling to be able to jump in there and then keep the pace on that. And you're
Yeah,
right. We were competitive. I think
yeah,
that's why no matter what game we played, jump rope, tag, that was a great game. Hide and
yep.
seek, when it started to get a little dark out, that was always
Yep.
fun.
Freezer tag. I think if you got touched, you had to stand in the position you were in. Yeah. I read that bocce ball is one of the oldest games, and it originated in the Roman Empire. And then the Italians developed it to the game that we have today. And that's a little more popular nowadays than I recall when we were young. But
Yeah, I don't think we played bocce ball looking back. I think I was a younger adult, and it was kind of at a kegger or something. We did do keggers, didn't we, Kath?
Yeah,
Another childhood game, I want to go back a little bit.
sure.
All across the country and even the world, they call it duck, duck, goose. We call it what?
Duck, duck, gray duck.
Yeah, we're the only place where they call it gray duck. And that was
Mm.
always a fun game because you'd get the adrenaline flowing. Are they gonna touch you and say gray duck, and then you got to run? And yeah, we had some pretty fun games, and we can't forget wiffle ball. That was
Right.
always fun. That was one where you could use more limited space to play. I know that in your neighborhood, there's a vacant lot between you, the Zemans, and the Caseys, and your house,
Right.
because it was left field, had a lot of windows broken, and a lot of the
Yeah.
siding got smashed, and it was just a hub, that vacant lot there, and we were always doing something.
Yeah, I remember even playing baseball and softball. The rule was if you hit it over my house, it was a grand slam. If you hit the house, it was a triple. If you hit the window, you got my mom coming out saying, okay, who's paying for it this time? It wasn't like all these activities we did, there were not adults around all the time watching us. And my dad was an auto mechanic, and he got this huge truck inner tube. It was like a trampoline, sort of, is how we used it. And we had to cooperate. We had to learn to cooperate to make it work good. I think I mentioned to you that Piker Merkwan, his nickname Piker, would jump and he'd be able to do flips and all this stuff. But if we weren't sitting on parts of it or cooperating, he couldn't have done it. There's just so much you learn. And my dad would put us in the middle of it and roll, that lot between the Caseys and our house slanted down, if you recall, and he put us in the middle of it, roll it down, and then we'd kind of roll up the other end of the hill. And it was just a blast. We just
Yeah,
had so much fun together. And what this book talks about is kids need to have time being outside, doing activities with each other without constant supervision, and
yeah.
figuring out how to work things out if you get frustrated, and just enjoy each other face to face.
It's important to explore and figure things out and look at the world with wonder and try to figure out how everything works. And you don't always have to have, like you said, or the book says, have a parent there to do it. I wish there was more of that. And you mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast that we actually would go outside all the time. So our
Yeah.
days were full of wonder. So, Kathy, we had all this wonder as kids, skating at the lake, building forts. That's another thing we did, pretending we
Right.
were, in Sherwood Forest and all that stuff, and slugging each other in the arms to see who would flinch or, say ouch first. Just kid stuff. What are kids missing out now, according to the book you're reading?
Well, the book that I'm reading is called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. He talks about particularly the Gen Z age group, which is from 1995 through about 2010. The concern is that they're spending so much time on video games and on their phones, and that we just need to be really aware of making sure that they're not addicted to it, and that they're getting time. It feels like there's been a loss of some of the childhood play that we benefited from. And I do see some in our neighborhood. I see the neighbor boys next door out mostly doing sports stuff, but they're outside. They're not just sitting in the house. But I have grandkids who like their video games, but the parents have to make a real effort to model not using your phone all the time and getting outside and doing things, with planning activities with other kids, and not feeling like you have to supervise them all the time. That kids are afraid to make decisions and don't know how to socialize because they're not interacting face to face with people. Like when we'd go play baseball and be pitching and get hit in the stomach. What do we do?
Which happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that.
More than once. Yeah.
So what you're saying is where we would just go out and spontaneously do things, the kids from maybe a generation or maybe two now, they don't know how to plan like that. They aren't able right now. It's not part of their DNA. They're not wired that way right now. And so the parents sadly have to help plan and say, get off that computer, get off that video games.
Yep.
I remember my mom would say, get off the boob tube, quit watching that TV, get outside. So the parents have an even more difficult task in this time of instant gratification. The kids' attention spans are like gnats. They have this ultra stimulation looking at a little screen. And I know my grandson, when he comes over and stays with us, it's so frustrating because he lives on a screen. You know,
Right.
always
Right.
trying to get out and play catch or do something with me.
Yep, that's so important. They need to be taught how to be safe. Like my one of my daughters used to like to run, and even in high school there were more than one time when she'd get followed by somebody in our small town, and we think we're in a safe area. And there were times when I'd say, okay, we need to call the police and just alert them that this guy is driving around. It happened to my son too. And yes, those are scary times, but they just need to be able to know how to keep themselves safe. So we talked about don't just run home. Go to a neighbor's that there's somebody there, or cut through the neighbor's yard so they aren't following you to your house. So there's just safety things that you have to be teaching your kids, but you got to give them the ability to take risks. One of the things in the book that it was talking about is, you remember on the playground, there was that playground equipment that spins around, and if you work together, and it spins around faster and faster, and then you jump on, and you have to hang on. If you don't, you're going to fall off and get hurt. Well, now so many parents are into lawsuits, and they can't even have those kinds of things. But this book is talking about how beneficial that was, because you had to learn to work together and you had to use your muscles. And there's good things about some of those older things, or taking risks, or going to the amusement park and
Yes.
going on scary rides. It's overall pretty safe. It's just kind of scary. It's okay to do that stuff.
So it heightens your senses. You have to do coordinated work with your friends. Unfortunately, now they want, like you said, they want to sue you for getting hurt on equipment where they should be able to figure it out. The old joke is I fell off the monkey bars and I died, but my mom told me to wipe the dust off and get back.
Yeah, yes. We would run throughout our whole neighborhood all the time. The older boys usually would be getting us involved in crabapple fights or whatever. But we were running through the neighborhood, and neighbors watched out for each other. There wasn't huge risk in that.
Maybe part of the reason, I don't know what the book says, but I think a lot of people are desensitized to violence and they see really perverted things on that screen. And it almost makes it acceptable, some of the perversion. And I think people that go out and do bad things to kids, I think they're emboldened because of what they've learned on the internet or watching things that we never would dream of seeing when we were kids. I think the
Yeah,
times have changed for the worse for that. Technology's great, but it's also bad in so
yeah.
many ways too.
And that this book doesn't just downplay technology. It's just how it's used. And if
Mhm.
if a kid is able to make sure that they're active in sports or face-to-face activities, and they're pretty well rounded, you can increase the amount of time that they're on a technology. But if you see that a child is really struggling with maybe an addiction to it of some sorts, then it seems like they may need some help to make sure that they're getting the activity that levels that they need. Plus, just the exercise, the physical exercise does so much for your mind. The book is just talking about, if you're not careful, then
Yeah.
more heightened anxiety and depression can occur.
Yeah. And then we also went through this lockdown that didn't help any kids or it didn't help
Oh,
society whatsoever as far as social development and
yeah.
education and all that. We're talking about things that we did as kids that I think helped shape us as the people we are now. And I think overall it worked out pretty well. I know that my neighborhood and yours, we could cross over. You could come to ours and we still had fun. We knew how to have fun and we didn't have to be babysat. And I really long for those days. And I know with everything going on that we just touched on, it's hard to have those days come back. They're not going to come back. But like you said, we can be diligent. And if we see them on the screen too much, we can try to help them. And
Yep.
we need to do that. We need to get creativity back in kids' lives because it will help them be better adults.
The book also talks about parents really need to work together. It's a lot easier to say to your, even as young as 6-year-old or 10-year-old, you can have a phone that you can call us on if there's an emergency. But if other parents are doing the same sorts of things, it's easier to say, well, not everybody has a phone,
That's interesting because I have adult children, you have adult children, grandchildren. Looking from the outside, it seems like the parenting is so much different. And some of the stuff our parents did, they couldn't get away with now, or we couldn't have. There's got to be a way to do it where they have a healthy upbringing and
hmm
become good citizens.
Well, we were fortunate to grow up in a time and in neighborhoods that were close knit and we felt comfortable in and were able to just do a lot of fun things.
What we were talking about with the cell phones, some parents just, they're too busy to really, I don't want to say care, but they'll give them their kids a phone just so they can stay busy, and they think they're doing a good thing, but not if it's not monitored. I don't think it's a good thing. And then you get
hmm
other parents where they will monitor it,
Yep.
which is great. But how do you get it so it works out where these kids don't get swayed to be like the kid that has no supervision? That's a
hmm
tough putt. That's a tough putt. I
It
don't know.
is. It is tough. Yeah.
We were talking also, Kathy, about what we were doing back in the day, the games we played and all that. This week, when this show airs, it's the 55th anniversary of Apollo 11 and men landing on the moon for the first time. I want to bring that up because it's a major thing in our life, and we
hmm
got to see it. We got to see Walter Cronkite.
Right.
We got to see them broadcast all that. And we were down at the Medicine Lake Community Club Carnival when that happened, which is the high point of our summer
Oh,
when we
right.
go to that carnival because they have the cakewalks, they have rides, they have clowns, they have baseball tournaments, they have a parade, they have a prince and a princess, king and queen of the carnival throwing out candy. It was a big deal put on by the neighborhoods in the west side of Medicine Lake. And to have somebody land on the moon at the same time, what a great childhood moment that was all around. It was good even with just the carnival, but to have the men landing on the moon was even better.
Yep. Yep. Whenever things like that happen, I just recall people really paid attention to those kinds of
Yep,
things. Even when we'd have those kind of situations when we were in school, they'd stop the school day and show it to us on
right.
TV. It's like, this is phenomenal. It's amazing.
Well, John Kennedy in the early 60s said that we would have space flight and we will land humans on the moon by the end of the 60s. And it came true. And
hmm
it's amazing. We talk about these screens, these things right here, right? This is more powerful, I read, than all it took all those computers, rooms and rooms and rooms of computers to do that moon launch and coordinate everything and have the
Oh,
computing power to do that. That's the good of technology, right?
right. That's right. Do you remember the types of computers we used in school, with the ticker tapes and things like that? Can you imagine how much more challenging for them back in the 60s when this was happening it would be for them?
And when we got out of college, a computer basically was nothing more than a desk size word processor. you know, it just
Right.
organized things and you type things in there. It's amazing how far we have come. So we have to give credit to technology
That's
uh,
right.
as well. Man, what we did growing up was so fun and it shaped us. And we sound like old crotchety people maybe to Gen Zs or millennials who may be watching this, but we just had it good. We had the best music, the best cars, the best of times, and we benefited from our parents and the hardships they went through. And some say that maybe we spoiled our kids. I don't know. I don't know. Some say we did, that we had it maybe too easy. I know I had to work hard, Kathy, for everything
Oh,
I had,
yeah.
and you did too.
Yep. I started babysitting probably when I was 12 for probably a quarter an hour or something like that. We were busy, and this isn't a bad time. The technology is amazing, and it's all about how you use it and making sure that you have social time together.
Yeah. And the other thing that we didn't really touch on with being outside all the time and being active is fitness. We were physically fit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the
Right.
fact that child obesity is off the charts. So it's another reason to get kids outside and active. Have to be safe, we know that, but they have to get outside and we have to work hard to provide that for them.
Yep. Right. Right.
Kathy, it's been a fun chat. It's always good to see you.
You too,
And
Rick.
and I want to get you back on with Terry Walsh again. I really enjoyed that episode where we talked about the rural TV shows. And let's keep thinking of topics to talk about. And the listeners out there, give us your thoughts on what you did growing up, or what games you played, or any of the games that we mentioned. Did you play those games? And I'm sure that Kathy's topic that she came up with today was a great one. If you have any other topics you want us to cover, send them in the comments below on YouTube. And if you're watching on one of the audio platforms, send an email to me at myboomerbuddies4@gmail.com. Myboomerbuddies4@gmail.com. Kathy, do you have any closing thoughts?
We grew up in a good time, and we did lots of fun things. And I think families do, for the most part, really quite well now as well. It's just a reminder, we can learn from the past.
And it's good to have a nostalgic longing like us. And as we talked, we realized times have changed and we realize how fortunate we had it growing up. It's good to look back, but it's also good to be in the now. And we'll do everything we can
Right.
to make life better for the kids and grandkids. Until next time, I'm Rick Reed for Kathy St. Martin and My Boomer Buddies podcast. We'll see you
Around the block.
If you enjoy this podcast and are viewing on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button on your screen and share it with your friends, and feel free to comment below. You can also hear us on Spotify and Buzzsprout. Feel free to email comments to myboomerbuddies4@gmail.com